Eyes on Whiteness is a podcast that illuminates the insidious and ignorant ways of whiteness, regardless of intent. Our guests are invited to talk about the ways white supremacy and patriarchy are pervasive and ever-present. Our conversations are rooted in a commitment to normalizing the how, not if lens, for looking at the ways it's present for all of us. If you'd like to support us, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can find us on Patreon, Eyes on Whiteness. I'm your host, Maureen Benson, and sometimes I'll be joined by Deidre Barber, who will only show up when she feels like it. The podcast is produced by the brilliant and kind Erin Rand Freeman. We're excited to welcome you to the show. In this second part of a powerful discussion with Roger Bonair-Agard, we go deeper into the discussion on transmuting white supremacy and patriarchy within ourselves, each other, and in our communities. This is a deeply personal conversation that includes a look into our ancestry and the harm that all of us have endured from the atrocities of white supremacy.
If I don't write these poems, I might not survive any of this. So yeah, I think that's what it is, right? Because I guess that even with no choice, there are people still making the other choice. You know, it seems to me that's how people end up like deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy and not knowing why, because they have all the things they were told that are supposed to make them happy.
Yeah.
You know, beautiful children, a job, or whatever. And
we know, too many of those folks are hiding out in corners of their garage,
right,
not living their life, right?
Right.
Or imploding their lives.
Right.
Their imaginary lives. You know, we haven't talked at depth about this, but I've told you that one of the tools that Deidre really took lead on designing is the distinction between dismantling white supremacy and patriarchy and transmuting white supremacy and patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, when we have guests on, oftentimes people talk about dismantling whiteness. And you said that word a couple times here, but as I'm thinking about the people who, whether or not we're making an active choice to create the space to listen, as you're talking about, you know, with something called you to not go to law school and to become a poet, and whether it was an act of rebellion or revolution, or it was honoring your most authentic self, or more than that, or all of that. There was something, there were some characteristics there, I think, that enable folks to listen with whether we really know that we're listening.
Right.
And I would argue that I think as Deidre and I have been sitting with what it takes to you know, should ultimately is the end goal to dismantle and end white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism, sure. And also one of the challenges with that is that it can be overwhelming because it's not going to happen in our lifetime, right? I think we would agree there. But the way in which we think about transmuting white supremacy lands on me as in your example of, you know, a few of those tools are being introspective, being vulnerable, being transparent, an intersectional inquiry of sorts, invoking collectivism, right? And so I'm just really struck by what people will call brave is actually when you just really take that time to listen and just have such a clear voice. How can you unhear that voice? It's not possible, right?
Sure.
And so that's, I think, the misnomer that it's like, oh, well, then it's not really a choice. Well, no, I just can't unhear the thing I heard. So
right. Right.
I was giggling too because I'm laughing that you chose not to go to law school, which is inherently this, you know, value-based, academically rigorous. You know, my son's a lawyer, right? That your mom was able to say that, and so I'm sure you did get cussed out. But then you faced those same things in poetry with the academic rigor of form, right? In order to
sure. Yeah. I mean, no, that's a really great note. But the very nature of the poet, I think people understand, is also to say, nah, not that, right? The thing is that whiteness is insidious, and whiteness is trying to hold all corners down. And so whiteness has always been in the arts as well, and has attempted to formularize it in such a way that it creates gates and gatekeepers, and people who get the postings and people who get the appointments. And I'm not saying that automatically, if you get those appointments and postings and prizes, etc., that means you are on the other side. There are many poets I know, many artists I know, who burn those doors down while still staying very firmly themselves.
Right.
But I think that those whitenesses are only ever insisted upon by the people who feel they are losing a foothold, right? So Patrick knows all them forms. Patrick can use them with his eyes closed. He can lecture on them. He can speak to prosody, he can speak to poetics, he can speak to meter, he can speak to whatever. But if something grabs him by the collar emotionally and he loves it, he's not asking those questions of it, right? He doesn't care what was used in it. He feels it, right? Fact of the matter is, all those things are used in it, but sometimes but some of them are things we don't know. All the prosodies we know are, the patterns of emphasis and non-emphasis into feet in a line, right? We know because they've been defined by Western classical English for us, right? Mm-hmm. There are feet and rhythmic structures and musically rhythmic structures that come from elsewhere that don't show up in the 2/4, 4/4 of Western music timings, right? Mm-hmm. And so people speak in that way, and people write poems in that way, and those are other rhythms that make the heart skip differently, that make the blood run different. And so again, one has to be willing to listen to and to hear something other than what one has heard before. You have to be willing, and I think this is a really interesting way to think about possession, right? Mm-hmm. One has to be willing to be possessed, right? We think of art as a thing that when it really moves you, you don't have a choice, right? Which is the same thing, the same ideology, the same place that spirit possession comes from. Mm-hmm. Possession in terms of whiteness means a completely different thing, and it's something that cannot be allowed. So that these ideas, these very strict notions of what should happen in a poem or a song or a symphony, mm-hmm. Cannot ever be dispossessed, cannot ever be possessed by something else. And so if you relax, however, there are other things that will possess you, right? And then you have to rethink your world, right? Whiteness does not want to allow that. And so because in some ways, whiteness believes that it will be erased if it is possessed by this thing, right? Not realizing that that possession, that the reason people in spiritual practice allow possession to happen to them is that when the spirit leaves, they are enhanced. They know more shit.
Right.
They're more deeply connected to God, right? And if you allow yourself to be possessed, when my spirit leaves, you will also be more deeply connected to God, right? And that's the thing that whiteness can't hold on to, right? Allow itself to be possessed.
That reminds me of our conversation about my identity as an atheist.
Right.
It's interesting because as I was listening, I was thinking about what if, if the invitation to listen to something that maybe you haven't heard before, but I was thinking about, one of the frames I offer to people is how whiteness is playing out, not if it is playing out, right? For where, is it here? It's
Sure.
it's here.
Yeah.
And so it made me wonder, what is it like to listen to something I have heard before, but that whiteness has challenged me to erase it? But that's somewhere in my blood, in my connection to all beings, I have heard this before.
Well, I mean,
but isn't that possession, right? Like,
sure. I mean, but I almost think we could go back to your question of atheism again, right? And like we've talked about that a lot, but I think that for somebody to claim an atheism, that they have to conceptualize a God, right? They have to conceptualize God. That's and right. Say, I don't believe in that.
That's right.
Right? Which doesn't necessarily mean you don't believe in some other shit.
That's
right. And you a motherfucker who plants and raises chickens, right? Like,
and practices plant medicine, and right, like lights candles and connects with ancestors. Like, no, I mean that's the point, is that the
right.
People will tell me, oh, you're not an atheist, and I'm like, first of all, how are you going to tell me how I identify? But as you pointed out years ago, at this point, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, what you pointed out was my declaration of atheism actually underscored my resistance to white supremacy in religion. Right. And I hadn't thought about it that way, because I knew something spoke to me when I would sit and listen, but I don't believe it to be a particular being. I always say, I don't, the only thing I think that there's a higher power than me is the power of we, and whatever that looks like. We transcending the body that I'm in, this creation of life that I'm in, that there is a we here, which is collectivism, transcending what is currently scientifically, which is another conversation, proven to be a little, right? So anyway, I was thinking about that as possession, and I was thinking about, what is it like to not have it be like, oh, it's not something I've heard before, but to challenge us to go deeper and be like, no, you have heard this before.
Yeah, wow.
Have you heard this?
Right.
And that the amount of the talk about the bramble, right? Like the stuff to clear out that would get in the way of people even imagining that they had.
Right. Well, I think, I think one of the ways in which, one of the real simple ways, in simple kind of spaces of whiteness, where even people who have been, is the relationship to the police thing, right? And the willingness to call the police or not call the police, right? And the comfort with calling the police, even for a lot of very, very, very progressive white people, right? The feeling comfortable with calling the police when something, crazy goes down. That's one of the ways in which I think there's a hearing that happens, a belief system that takes place, and the hearing that isn't happening. And of course, lots of Black people call the police too.
Sure.
But I think that that is one of those examples about how deeply whiteness and power and patriarchy have corrupted our ability to hear, our ability to believe, such that, so for instance, there was about a month ago, I think I was telling you, there was a huge block party out here in front of the house. And you know, the neighbor texted us and was like, we called the police, could you all call the police? Such and such, and you know, and so of course, you know, we don't do that in my house.
Right.
And but I remember the first thing I thought was, call it why they have a vaccine. If you, right, like why we come, you know, if the police come, what's that going to do? The only thing that can happen if the police come is that more friction between police and Black people, right? A. B, there is a profound disrespect of the police as workers that we're not recognizing, we're participating in when we do that. And I feel like that's one of the ends, that's one of the places for us to start listening, to be able to dismantle whiteness, to pull the police in and say, when we call you against these people, right? When we pull you, what was the first Becky barbecue, for instance, right?
Barbecue Becky, she had to move out of Oakland, boy.
Right. When you look at these people barbecuing, decide they're not doing the right thing, and decide to call the police to handle this, right? This really petty thing that is happening, this nuisance that as far as you can see just needs to be cleaned up. So you call the garbage people. That's what the police are to you at that point, right?
And self-appointed herself as a police person with her whiteness as protection to hang out until the cops got there.
Right. You know what I mean? To say like, I'm going to call these people to come in here to do this thing that isn't really worth the time and the energy. There could be other things they are doing. They could be like just not doing overtime that night and going home to their goddamn children because they are human beings too, right? And in this case, you're asking them to come and interact with people who may have all the fucking COVIDs, right? And it won't do nothing, right? Ultimately, what we find out, and in fact, what the same neighbor was able to confirm for us, was that the big homie came back from jail after 30 years. And that's why people were gathering in the street.
Wow.
That motherfucker went to prison in 1990. Wow. Belle Biv DeVoe was on the charts.
I hate you.
And he has just come home right now.
Wow.
So think about, for people living on the west side of Chicago, right? Who the risk of being in the streets, like y'all ain't give a fuck about them for how long? Now you give a fuck about my safety, right? The big homie who was, according to the grapevine, the one who used to keep shit straight on this block, he come home. To many people, that's worth the risk. You gotta come welcome that brother back.
That's right.
Right? And so now we've called the police in. And now we've jeopardized the worker again, right? And let's be clear, in this house, we're doing it too. We want the convenience of not having to encounter. We call in fucking Amazon and whoever else all the time to come and deliver shit, so we don't have to fucking meander through places, right? We're treating workers badly in that way too. Yes, I can argue that on other ends, I'm fighting for them. I'm fighting for, you know, for them to get bigger wages and blah 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 and all kinds of things. Right? But these are the ways in which whiteness does not allow us out of the circle of it. Like, you really got to find a way to decide to not participate at all in the world if you're going to be outside of the circle of whiteness and the work and the fucked up work it does.
Well, it requires you to humanize these workers.
Yeah.
And
right.
You know, and which anything's possible once you humanize. I mean, the level of respect
Sure.
we give, you know, hurt injured animals
Mm-hmm.
exceeds the level of respect you would give all of these frontline workers, including the police, of whom,
Sure.
you know, there is a complicated and violent relationship with. Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. You know, you mentioned earlier that you work in the jails.
Mm-hmm.
We talked punitive, and you brought up the police here in this moment. I'm curious. One, I've heard that in particular in Chicago jails, the virus is the rates of virus infection are the highest in the country.
Sure.
So first and foremost, I hope the ones that you know and love, and even the ones that you don't, as many of them are as well as possible, given the atrocity of the jail system.
Mm-hmm.
But curious what you've observed and how the insidious nature of whiteness and or the resistance to the efforts to dismantle or transmute whiteness are happening on the ground there.
Yeah. Well, as you probably well know, there's a massive effort to try to get judges to release people from the jails, to release elderly, to release people who are, well, I mean, we kind of want everybody released, but to at least release people who are non-violent offenders. Mm-hmm. But even within the context of that, what non-violent means is crazy, right? So because a 15-year-old who is in possession of a gun might be considered a violent offender, right? We who live on the ground in Chicago understand that for many youth, just being strapped doesn't feel like a choice, right? Their perception is not that it's a choice to them, right? And so to call them violent simply because they have a gun is a massive disservice. To call them violent, even if they're fired off a gun, might be a massive disservice, right?
Well, also racist as fuck, given the level of NRA advocacy in this country, but whatever.
Correct, right? So there is that. So there's that massive movement happening. The young people who I talk to, who are alumni of our programs inside and who we work with outside now, they can recite you chapter and verse about which judge will give you a fair shake and which judge won't, which judge is just trying to lock you up. And so we're starting to talk about the ways in which those young people are really the ones who need to tell us how to work, right? Like who to go after, right? Like, because they are the ones who've sat in those courtrooms. Those young people have sat in those courtrooms and can tell you which judges, if in the rare occasion you see a white boy approach the bench, gets a pat on his wrist and sent home, while the black boys get, the entire book thrown at them. Mm-hmm. So I'm just beginning to learn some of those peculiarities of the situation right now, that there are particular judges that that people are trying to flex on and whatnot.
Do they run for office? Are they appointed? Are there ways to get judges removed? Because it struck me that those youth are perfect to be campaign leads.
Absolutely. So yes. So there are judges who run for office. I'm not exactly. This is another thing I have to study. Like, which are the judges who run for office? Which are the ones that are appointed? So that one can have a sense of how to carry that fight to them. In terms of the people who I've worked with, I don't know who's sick and who's not. And particularly in the case of the adults I've been working with in Division 10, that's really kind of crazy me, because there's no way I can go back in there anytime.
No.
soon. And the room, well, you can't really see how big this room, but this is, this is like an average size bedroom. And the room I teach in there might be the square footage of your house minus your kitchen area, right?
So like 600 square feet.
Minus your kitchen and minus your bedroom. So if you go back towards the bathroom, that's my classroom, right? And I have 16 guys in there.
So for all of you who've never been to my home, about 500 square feet, 400, 500 square feet, roughly.
Closer to 400, right?
Wow. Wow. No.
Maybe, right? And you have 16 dudes in there.
No.
So when I was going in there, that was actually part of the magic of those sessions. Like we had to be, it's mad uncomfortable, but we had to be like this, and we were talking like this, and we were fucking with each other like this.
Like need and need. Yeah.
Right. But we can't, that cannot happen until 2021 and a half, as far as I'm concerned. And so much brilliant work was happening in there. And now, I don't know. So many ways in which the work we do, we hope that that's building into, because making your own work is a mitigation practice, right? This is work that if the student asks and wants, it could go in their file, right? And if they have a lawyer who, who's doing some legwork and et cetera, et cetera. For the most part, if you are in jail, especially with the juveniles, the only thing that goes in their file is when they fuck up, right? So you get up without asking, you get into a fight, right? That shit is in your file. If you want some other shit to go in the file, you have to specifically ask for it to be there, right? And when you're 15 and 16, who has the wherewithal to be like, can I, you know what I mean? So we've got young people who find themselves in the position. We have one young person, for instance, who had a high-paid lawyer and did all his own mitigation work himself. He is out now at the age of 21 because of his own work. Think about looking at 45 years in prison and having to do all the work necessary to turn that into something else, even though your family is paying a high-priced lawyer. And in fact, having to tell your lawyer to go against the wishes of your lawyer to do that work, and to how you're going to plead in court, and to how you're going to conduct your case, right? So I think many of us obviously recognize that the carceral system is flawed, right? But I think also for the vast majority of us, that's academic, right? The idea that, if you say Black boys are locked up at 3 times the rate of white boys for the same infractions, yes, we understand that, and that's fucked up, but that's academic. Right. That shit becomes more real when you have Black boys in your class who've been in the courtroom, who are telling you what's happening. That's why, I saw that thing happen, right? Who are telling you, when you wrote this letter for me, this is what happened with the judge. Of the students we've had who have asked us to write letters on their behalf to take into the court, 100% of them have had ameliorated sentence because of those letters, right? So when we say show up for a young person, write a letter, whatever, it's not on some bullshit. It's not on some, this is not even some writer. This is not even some call your congressman shit. This is real life. That shit actually works, and you actually help change the numbers, right? Change the potential for getting out of that situation for somebody. So in that way, I'm in this particular place in which, not just in my personal life where I'm working about it, and there's this kind of esoteric idea of whiteness and struggling against whiteness, and occasionally it makes itself into my body, and I find it when people discriminate against me, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also my supposed work life, like these are the ways in which it is happening on a very, very real way from moment to moment to moment to moment. And so therefore, the idea of what whiteness is and what it does always feels very real to me, and never feels like it's just an academic thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the distinction between academic and connection, like authentic human connection, because often they're at odds, as whiteness will have us, right? That whiteness doesn't value, you know, back to kind of time again, like, you know, the joke about CP time, or, you know, the joke in many cultures of Black and brown people where there's always the time. Again, one of the big takeaways I had was just how often I would abruptly end a conversation or abruptly start a meeting and not give a shit about how somebody was doing, because we had an agenda and we had 45 minutes. Right? And I was like, this is just what we do. And having been immersed in communities of color now for decades, just really having to move from the intellectual to the heart space of really understanding the deep value, whether Whiteness as culture allows us that, but really deeply understanding value in having relationship and honoring connection. And that from that transformation actually happens. But so many of us are stuck in this intellectual, call your congressman, here's the data, da, 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 da. But we're not actually writing the letter. We're not, you know, we're not citing a statistic from human beings we know.
Right.
And that deep connection actually, for me, galvanizes me in a way far more than I thought my level of consciousness rooted in an intellectual analysis of what was happening.
Right.
You know, to even open a school and all, you know, that was still, while I had relationship, that was very intellectual, and here's what we should do to the school system. But they weren't my children.
Right. You know? Right.
And so transcending from this very intellectual space into how do you move when you are called to move from a connection is a very different, for me anyway, as a white person, has been profoundly different than studying it and coming up with a theoretical analysis of what needs to happen. So I appreciate you uplifting that. And that,
yeah, it's oh man, there was just one thing I had started to connect just now. Yeah, so it's interesting you talk about having the meetings and jumping right into your, you know, agenda and whatnot. And you know, over the years, of course, I've kept thousands of writing workshops at this point, right? And there is a way you conduct them. You come in, you ask people who they are. I ask them where they're from. I might come up with a guiding question. All of that before we get into whatever the poem is. People get to know one another. They get to some level of comfort with who else is in the room before we get into a place where we're critiquing one another's poems or whatever. And I think it's fair to say that at this point, I can do that and run that with my eyes closed, right? As a praxis. And I remember when Matilda first joined us at Free Write, and the buzzwords of restorative justice were first happening in Chicago. And so a lot of people were circle keeping, and a lot of people were being trained as circle keepers. I was like, I want to get trained as a circle keeper too, right? And Matilda's like, for what? I'm like, but I want to do this work. She's like, I've been in your classroom. You're keeping circle. I'm like, what? What you mean? She's like, it's the same shit. Like, you're keeping circle. Like, you're making so blah blah blah. And so then she's talking about the principles, because that whole circle keeping principle as being applied to restorative justice is taken from indigenous peoples and particular modes of being. And she's saying, like, but you already doing it. Like, you're not doing the same exact things. You're not bringing objects for people to hold and whatnot, but you're bringing objects for people to hold, right? And so look at how whiteness can infiltrate the thing designed to counter whiteness, right? Such that I think that now I have to get officially trained and certified, right?
You better get a stamp on it.
Boom, right? In this particular way, that is, of course, belonging to some fucking people who ain't in the room, right? That comes from their tradition and their culture. And in fact, I've been doing it in a way that comes from my tradition and my culture, and that has Euro elements in it, of course, right? But in a way that doesn't, but in a way that is as fundamentally me as you can make it. And I think that there is absolutely something else I need to do if I'm to legitimize it, right?
Wow.
And so one of the things I hope that I'm getting across to anybody listening is that it's a constant work. It's a work that's never done, but you're gonna keep having victories if you keep you know what I mean? You're gonna keep having victories. You're gonna keep coming upon the victories and realizing you've already had that victory. There's an elder who was a friend of my mom's and who is like a national treasure in Trinidad named Pearl N2 Springer. And she has a thing she says, she's like, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, she's like, one of the greatest tragedies that we as Black people are facing is that we've already won and we don't know. Right? She's like, we won and we keep going back and fighting these battles that we've already won. Right? That's what I felt like in that moment. When Matilda, like, you're already running circle, my dude. Like, chill, you're good.
Wow.
You know, we already know these things. You know, I dug into this. I'm going back and trying to learn stick, and every part I get further, every moment I get deeper, I realize I get to know more about something I already know. Right? I'm like, fuck, damn.
Unmuting, if you will.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which I think that brings us back to my mind's racing. I think that there's so much to, you know, I'm trying really hard not to use the word dismantling anymore because I do believe in this transmutation, but there's a way in which you're underscoring the value of needing to study something, a way in which there's a pathway in which we study things that is valid, but the deep listening you've been talking about is so profoundly valid and not recognized that you were just listening to the guidance, right? That you may not have heard in those voices, but there's a direction to point you and there's an intuition there. You didn't go through a teacher pedagogy program. You were like, I know how to hold space. I have a craft. Let's do the classroom.
Right. And and here's the fucked up thing. I've been honing that shit for like 15, 17 years at that point.
Right.
And totally delegitimized it by saying, clearly I need to go learn this thing.
Yes.
Right? And in the meantime, so this Sankofa shit is real, right? This going back to get something. That the Sankofa shit is what's really the moving forward. That's getting me, right? The going back to get what I've left is the thing that's dragging me forward. So yeah, I think that's what the if there's a tool, right, to think of how one moves against it most effectively, it's the going back, right? The listening and the going back to what's the most. And I think that works for for European people too. I think we've had a little bit of this conversation in the past, where I think that to become white in America, you have to relinquish being Polish, being German, being Irish, being a whole bunch of other things that is fresh. You know what I mean? That have old people who say fresh things too, that have old people who know medicines, that have old people who have very, very important lessons about how you treat old people, about how you treat your past and your history, right? And I think, therefore, that maybe, you know, I've long felt that that's the path for white people, right? Because certainly I don't want no more white people studying yoga.
But my hips feel so good, Raj. No, listen, it's you Christine reminded me of Christine was on a couple weeks ago, and she reminded me of the conversation you and she and I had when she wanted to get a Japanese tattoo, and we started interrogating about her own ethnic background and were there not such symbols in Czechoslovakian culture. Stopped her from getting that tattoo and sent her down a pathway of looking at Czechoslovakian.
Wow.
But I actually, when I listen, I am, and it's really, you know, one of the ways resistance shows up for me is letting myself feel. And, you know, I've been very hard at work at that for a long time, just creating the space to just honor whatever it is that I'm feeling and move out of that intellect and crisis management. And we could just move past this. I mean, I could, you tell me where to go and I could backwards map us and get us there. That's not, that is definitely my strength. But to pause in the moment and feel, and I am beginning to really sit in the grief of not knowing my ancestors and not having grandmothers to connect with. Make my throat close when I say that right now. And so I think that's for me, that really resonates, that is a path as a white person, that I have, you know, lost my Irish, lost my Czechoslovakian heritage. And I know that there's so much rich cultural heritage there, both, you know, not even a both, there's so much rich cultural heritage there. And something that calls to me is to study witchcraft of these cultures, of my cultures. See, even in that moment.
Yeah.
Right.
You know who you probably need to bring on this, or just have a conversation with him in general. Jive Poetic.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, Jive has mapped his entire family back and found them on in 10 different countries and gone to find them.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. And so I think in the listening. So here's a thing that happened to me, because I completely understand the closing of your throat as you say that, right? You of course know the story of me and my mom having been adopted and finding out, and her brothers finding out she existed when she was 59 years old, right? And finding out that there was this older sister, blah, blah, blah. And then you know of me then starting to hang out with my uncles, these Nigerian uncles, and they introduced me to ancestors I didn't know I had. Wow. And so the first time Uncle Wole showed me a picture of my great-great-grandfather, this is like 2006, so I'm already 38 years old. And and by this time, his dad is also dead, and he finds these pictures and he doesn't know who they are, even though he's known his real mom the whole time. And he's like, so I have little pieces of story in Trinidad. He has little pieces of story in Nigeria. And he said, Roger, we don't know who this is. Who is this Nicodemus Smith? I'm like, Smith, it says granddad, 1941. That would have to be such and such and such. And then I was like, oh shit, this is my great-great-grandfather. I'd never known anybody before a grandfather in real life, and never met anyone in blood who is a grandfather at that point, right? So I was immediately plugged in, blah, 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 back. And I screamed. The only time I cried harder than that was when my mom died.
Wow.
So like, I just started, like, because the plug-in, the universal plug-in was so that my body didn't know what to do.
Wow.
Right? So if you're talking about listening and the body, right? And what it means to go back to find your truest self. I'm not saying that if you never find your ancestors, you will not be able to find that truest self, but you will find some shit. You know what I mean? And then when you find that shit, what will potentially open to you, there's no fucking telling, right? There's no fucking telling the potential that then opens to you. I don't think, so then 10 years later or whenever, when I'm talking to my dad, and I realize I need to ask my dad some questions about his side of the family. And he says, oh, and I go home and I'm like, Dad, you're about such and such and such. He's like, let's go see Rupert. Rupert is his older brother, right? So my dad is, at the time we had this conversation, we were in 2020. So this is 2018. And in 2018, my dad is just turning 75. Rupert is already 82. Rupert is now 84, right? And he says, Rupert knows everything about the family, right? So we go to Rupert, down in South. Rupert is ramrod straight, thin, fucking, like, he's skinny, but the muscles fucking bulging. He had just come in from pulling cassava outside.
At 82.
You know what cassava is like to pull from the fucking ground?
No.
Okay, yep, but you've seen a cassava, right?
Mm-hmm.
That shit don't look like it fucking surrender easy from the ground, do it? No. So anyway, so we go, he's just come from pulling cassava, and we, you know, he's starting to say, hey boys, such and such, you want a beer? You know, they heard we were coming, so they cooked all the fucking curry, apparently in South Trinidad. And, you know, we start to eat and so on. And then my dad says, hey, Rupert, he want to find out about the family, you know. And Rupert say, oh, and then just starts talking like it's nothing. He said, well, the oldest one, are we, a man named Richardson, you know, he was Fifth Company Moruga, come here in 18 such and such. So listen, this shit I'm telling you here is wildness. In the War of 1812 here in America, right? The English pulled up on the south coast of the United States, sent word in that anybody run away and come join them and fight against the US will get their freedom afterwards. Motherfuckers is like, bet. Run off and join the English and fight. After the war, some of them get taken to Newfoundland in Canada, and some of them, over time, get taken to other crown lands in Trinidad. My oldest ancestor I know of was a slave in the south of America, ran away, got on a boat, and got put in Fifth Company Moruga. They got put in virgin land. They had to hang out with the Native Americans. Slavery is still happening in Trinidad at that point in time. So they're free men, but they're like, you know, it's not like they can move about doing some shit. They have to clear virgin bush in order to live. And the names of those villages are still the names of the companies as they land. So there's First Company, Second Company, Third Company, Fourth Company, Fifth Company, Sixth Company. They're known as the Americans. No, not the Americans, the Americans. Merikins.
Wow.
Right? So people who are Americans in Trinidad all can fucking tell you who is who. So I went to a thing later on, like 2 years later. I'm like, I go home, and they're like, "You American?" I'm like, "Yeah." They say, "Who's your family?" Richardson, Fifth Company. They say, "Oh, you you know who is your cousin? Such and such and such, such and such and such, such and such and such." Among the things I'm finding out is that these are soldiers, right? And these are wartime dudes. They were some of the deepest, most skillful practitioners of stick fight.
Of course.
Right? So if you start to go back, you know what I mean? It's like, you could think you have something in the closet, you start digging through the closet, you're like, oh, okay. Push further into the closet, like I knew the shit was here all the time. Wow. You know? Or you find some shit somebody else left. You know what I mean?
Fuck your Britannica.
Right. You know? And 10 years ago, I couldn't even tell you Rupert's name.
Right.
Right? So, that's the thing. There's somebody somewhere who is so fucking dogged. Like, think of who you are as a human being, right? Think of who's in your bloodline.
Oh, I'm so clear that I'm fragile compared to my grandmother's grandmother's grandmothers.
Right? There's some hateful bitch who won't die somewhere who is like, they gave away baby girl and such. Like, I'm gonna write her name here. That shit is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, I kind of, if you want to bring it back to the whole God thing, that's kind of the fucking God I'm on, right? Yeah. Like, only God can make me figure out that who this Richardson dude is at age 50 something, you know what I mean? And then Rupert starts telling us shit that my dad has heard for the first time ever.
Wow.
And he's 75 at this point, right? And he's hearing Rupert is telling the story of how my dad got named, and my dad is like, what?
Because you created a listening.
Boom.
It's better than a beginning. Listening, the new beginning.
Woo!
It was an inside joke, y'all, but the new listenings. I also really, I think it's at this point in our relationship, 15 years in, it's intuitive, and we probably don't need to name it, but I want to name, for the sake of anyone who's listening, how, to me, what was just so beautiful about this last exchange is that so often when people begin, particularly people of different racial identities, begin comparing the ways in which loss has happened or ancestry. Remember homeboy at the school who's like, my people, the white man who came, said, my people too came on a ship and I too felt lost.
Yeah.
And you, bless your whole heart, waited until we got in the parking lot to lose your entire mind. But there's a way in which oftentimes the conversation becomes competitive, or it's not even oppression Olympics, but like there's a competition, right, around that. And what I just deeply appreciate was the way in which we were holding space for each other's experience. And there was nothing competitive in that. There was a kinship and a love and a connection. And I think that's just so important, that particularly because when people get heightened about areas that you and I are unpacking that hold value, that are not valued in whiteness, emotion, connection, family, the we, not I, or whatever God is, right? The listening, that our bodies physiologically respond like, no, like they just, the affect goes up. Yeah. And when our affect goes up, I think often that is when whiteness kicks in, and people are like, battling for time, or like keeping emotions out of it, or making it competitive, or like worried about time, all the ways. So anyway, I just think that was really important, that for me, that was a really beautiful example of holding space for both of us, but also honoring that there is healing to be done everywhere if we are to
Sure.
transmute and ultimately dismantle white supremacy. So.
Yeah. And of course, the idea is that white supremacy hurts all of us, including people who would be considered white.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this, it's a whole searching that has to take place, and a celebrating of the searching that has to take place. And at the same, like, obviously you and I have built a trust that allows us to let the other person talk and discover, and interrupt the other person in their discovery and say that, you know what I mean? So, but I think, like, yeah, that's it.
That's all. Just,
That's all. That and this chocolate.
I saw you bust out a snack. I was shocked. Smoking stout? Nice.
Yeah. There is stout in this chocolate.
Wow, you have boozed out your chocolate. I am not mad.
It was bound to happen. And as you know, Booze Chocolate was my nickname in college.
I was just about to tell you that my previous band name that I was the lead singer of was Boozy Desserts. And I wondered if you'd put brandy on the Aussie Bites yet.
Woo!
You're welcome. I would love to talk to both you and Matilda about Soka.
Okay, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
I really, really want to have Mama's perspective in there too. I think that would be so powerful.
Yeah.
This is one of the unexpected. I intellectually knew there were going to be awakenings or beginnings or new listenings in this.
Sure, yeah.
Like, everybody's been creating these great, amazing conversations. It's just been really beautiful to, like, I was on a call with Tongo, who was saying one of the things he's really appreciated is that these open mics that people are creating online is that it creates an opportunity for a national audience.
Yeah.
That's just simple.
Yeah.
Yes, let's bookmark this.
Okay, cool.
I would love that. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for this talk.
No, it was beautiful. And I just appreciate you sharing just so much about, I'm grateful, Roger, that you are on the path for your own self, but also for those of us that get to love you, the discovery of your most authentic self. It's been gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Eyes on Whiteness. We appreciate you listening, and if you're able to support us, don't forget you can find us on Patreon, Eyes on Whiteness. Every little bit helps. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep disrupting white supremacy in yourselves and each other. We got a lot of work to do. Take care, y'all. See you next time.